Tonight on Primetime, with Project Freedom paused, Donald Trump now says a deal to end the war with Iran could be possible, but warns of major military strikes if an agreement isn't reached. So are we nearing a deal or a new phase of war? Good evening. Washington says it is temporarily pausing its naval escort mission after signs of movement in talks with Tehran. But with Iran tightening control over ship movements and both sides still trading warnings, the Strait of Hormuz remains trapped between diplomacy and danger.
The Donald Trump administration has announced a temporary halt to its naval operation, helping ships pass through the Strait of Hormuz, a vital route for global oil shipments. President Trump said the mission, known as Project Freedom, would be suspended for a short period after what he called strong progress in negotiations with Iran. He added the move followed a request from Pakistan, which has been acting as an intermediary. Despite the pause, US restrictions targeting Iranian ports will remain in place. He also said on Tuesday that Iran's military strength has been heavily weakened and claimed Tehran should surrender, adding that it is too proud to admit it.
They should wave, they're very proud. Maybe you won't see a white flag, but essentially that's already what they are. They should wave the white flag of surrender. In hockey they say, uncle, right? When are they gonna cry uncle? But and they have another expression. If this were a fight, they would stop it.
At the same time, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio said Washington favors a diplomatic solution, noting that the administration is aiming for a deal rather than further escalation. Meanwhile, Iran's state media reported that Tehran has introduced a new system to control ship movements through the strait. Under the plan, vessels must follow official guidance sent electronically and secure approval before entering the waterway. Iran's Revolutionary Guard warned ships to stick to designated routes, saying any deviation would be considered unsafe and could prompt a firm response. It also accused US forces of carrying out actions that have disrupted maritime security and put commercial vessels at risk. As the situation remains tense in the Strait of Hormuz, fears of further disruption to shipping continuing to weigh on global energy markets and oil fluctuation prices.
Washington is appealing to the United Nations, accusing Iran of threatening a vital global shipping route. Well, Marco Rubio says vessels have been attacked, mines placed in the water, and aid left trapped as the US pushes for international condemnation.
And I think it's a real test for the UN, right? As something that functions that can solve global problems. What is the purpose of the UN? The UN was supposed to be a place where you could peacefully resolve global conflict. Right now you have a country who is unlawfully, criminally, and illegally taking possession of an international waterway and blowing up commercial vessels and putting mines in the water. I don't know if people appreciate how outrageous this is, how unacceptable it is that any country would fire and try to sink commercial vessels or put mines in the water. Both of these things are illegal. And so we're going to take it to the UN, and we're going to give it another chance to be a forum in which we're not even asking people to commit troops to the region and help blow up the Iranian boats. All we're asking them to do is to condemn it, to call on Iran to stop blowing ships, to remove these mines, and to allow humanitarian relief to come through, because there's humanitarian aid that's trapped. That's it.
Well, joining me now from Rome is Ali Hussein Gulu-Zada, a geopolitical risk analyst and researcher focused on Iran and the wider South Caucasus. Ali Hussein, very good indeed to have you with us. Recriminations, rhetoric still on both sides. Nevertheless, though, do you get a sense that there is a real attempt now to try and calm things down?
Good evening, it's my pleasure. Well, firstly, there really is no alternative to diplomacy, and the parties really must reach an agreement sooner or later through some compromises, not only on Iran's part, but also on the part of the United States. Because firstly, the military option for resolving the Iranian crisis has practically been exhausted. Yes, the military option still exists, but personally, I don't think a hypothetical United States military operation to force Iran into concessions would be effective. And besides, it would be something like a one-off targeted operation like Midnight Hammer. But again, the military option has been exhausted, and there is no alternative to diplomacy. As for the recent incidents involving strikes on United Arab Emirates territory, specifically the crucial Fujairah oil terminal, denial is a traditional tactic of the Iranian side, which, although it may stem from Iran's new military doctrine of mosaic defense, so-called mosaic defense, where generals in the field may not coordinate strikes on targets. Of course, this is still no excuse for Tehran, because it carries the risk of escalation. As for the last part of the question, I personally believe that neither Washington nor Tehran nor the regional Gulf states are interested in escalation. On the contrary, they want to de-escalate the situation. As confirmation of my words, we can recall Donald Trump's recent statement regarding the Iranian strike on Emirate territory when the American president said that it didn't constitute a violation of the ceasefire. Furthermore, the American side announced the conclusion of Operation Epic Fury the day before through Secretary of State Marco Rubio.
Yeah, it does look like, as you say, that all sides are looking for a way out. I mean, Iran has shown, hasn't it, that it can shake Gulf economies without directly hitting the United States. Is that something that you think Washington is still sensitive to?
I think for the most part, yes. Moreover, the strategy of asymmetric warfare by Iran has indeed proven effective, and the United States is genuinely struggling to predict Iran's next moves. It's also worth noting that Iran strikes serve several purposes. Firstly, they weaken United States influence in the Gulf and deepen divisions among the Arab monarchies themselves. Furthermore, they call into question the effectiveness of the Abraham Accords with Israel. In other words, in addition to geoeconomics, Iran is also influencing the region's geopolitics. And I would add that just a few days ago, Iran yesterday established the PGSA, Persian Gulf State Agency, which has effectively become a, in fact, monopoly on the passage of ships through the Strait of Hormuz. And the reports are already appearing online that ships crossing the Strait of Hormuz are receiving radio messages regarding the rules and other regulations.
Mm. So pressure then from countries like the UAE now on Washington, making it harder for the US, I guess, to look at a full range of different options. And Iran, of course, will be acutely aware of this.
Probably yes, but the issue and its consequences are broader here. I certainly wouldn't say that the Emirates has directly become a full-fledged party to the Iranian-American conflict in the Gulf, but it's nonetheless of the features of the crisis. Moreover, an energy crisis that directly affects energy prices. And I also don't believe that the Emirates actually wants to become a player in this conflict, because it has already suffered significant losses, including as a country with a free business environment, for example, and in attracting investors. The UAE had worked to achieve this status for 30 years almost, and lost it practically in a month. This crisis will certainly force the Emirates to rethink its foreign policy strategy. Of course, it's very obvious, but I don't think the Emirates want to become a part of this conflict now, especially now.
And Ali Hussein, what is it that you feel Tehran actually really wants most of all at this point? Is it sanctions relief, more regional leverage, or something else?
In my opinion, Iran has generally always been a regional player, and now, given the current situation, Tehran's view objectively cannot be ignored. Yes, Iran's position over the last 3-4 years hasn't been the same, becoming weak, but Iran remains a player, and is proving it. As for its demands, given the nature of recent reports, information including insider information, Tehran is insisting on a phased settlement and First and foremost, the lifting of sanctions. They are the latest reports, information, but the problem is that a phased settlement agreement offers no guarantees of a full-fledged agreement in the future. This is a risk and the paradox for the United States. This is because the United States insists that Iran must not possess nuclear weapon, as well as on the issue of halting uranium enrichment, and there are specific points regarding Iran's missile program. Here, as we can see, there are also complex issues that could cause controversy, even if the United States agrees to Tehran's phased plan. Moreover, the issue of pro-Iranian proxies in the region shouldn't be also ignored. For example, in the case of Hezbollah or Houthis, because the proxy issue for Iran will also need to be discussed. And it's unlikely that Iran will renounce its influence over them.
And finally, Ali Hussein, who do you feel is carrying the most leverage at this point? So obviously, we don't know whether a deal is going to happen, but we're obviously entering a new phase.
As I said before, there is always a risk of escalation. It's some ways unpredictable. But I tend to think that in such a case, a United States operation would be one of like Midnight Hammer, but not long-lasting military operation. But in even a worst case scenario, of course, the war could spread to the entire Persian Gulf. And in that case, neither Washington nor Tehran would be able to stop the situation without regional mediators, Pakistan or Turkey, for example. And in this sense, Pakistan is a more advantaged option, one that both sides respect Islamabad. And even in Trump's announcement of the Operation Project Freedom, Pakistan played a huge role, as Trump mentions in his social media, Truth Social.
Ali Hussein, thank you very much indeed for joining us. We appreciate your analysis very much indeed.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Okay, now let's look a bit deeper into the latest energy-related implications of this conflict. Joining us from Washington is Dr. Umund Shokri, energy strategist and senior visiting fellow at George Mason University. Dr. Shokri, very good indeed to have you with us on the show. Thank you for joining us. If Washington pauses naval escorts but keeps sanctions pressure on Iran, is energy part of the negotiation then, or just a side effect of the crisis?
Thanks for having me on the show. Yeah, it's a great question. Let me give you more information about that. The role of energy in reshaping regional and global dynamics, especially after the 40-day war between Iran, US, and Israel. Energy play an important role in foreign policy, especially from the energy producer country and from the US as an energy producer and as a major energy consumer as well. And no matter who will be in the White House, I mean Democrat or Republican, trying to use as energy as a leverage of foreign policy to get more beneficial from the regional and global dynamic. Repeating your question, at present, energy pricing and any disruption in the region play an important role in Washington policy toward the GCC, Strait of Hormuz, and Iran as well. And we can see that any diplomatic effort directly affected that the oil price in the market and energy market quickly react to any possible signal from the US or Iran as well. I mean, any possible deal between US and Iran directly creating stability in the market, no matter from the transit route, no matter from the procedure region or in the consumer side as well. And any diplomatic effort in the coming days or coming week directly reshaping a global energy dynamic and especially oil pricing. And it's in favor of the both procedure and the consumer side as well.
And do you think the major buyers are already looking to some degree beyond the Gulf, including perhaps towards US supply, or is that still a little bit more sort of talk than action?
Yeah, this is a great question as well. After that, the Russia invasion of the Ukraine, all countries, no matter it's consumer or producer, more focused on the diversification of energy resources and trying to find more alternative route, a more alternative procedure to import from the reliable resource. And after that, this energy crisis and the war, we can see energy dynamic in the EU and other countries reshaped. And after that, this war, I mean, Iran, US, and Israel war, most energy consumers from the East Asia trying to find an alternative route and the procedure, and they reach the North America and some African countries to get more oil from these countries. But it is the reality that this consumer side has no more option on the table to find an alternative for the oil passing through the Strait of Hormuz. I mean, to find an alternative for oil comes from the Iran and the GCC country as well. But they have the little option. They can import more from the US, from the Canada and Brazil, and as I mentioned, from the some African countries. But the matter is the logistic, transit, and insurance as well. And altogether it means that if want to import from these countries, they have to pay more, and more energy prices means energy high inflation rate, and it's again it's national security, economic security, and energy security of consumer side as well.
Yeah, very difficult indeed for these oil producers, isn't it? I mean, so many ships are still stuck. What operational tweaks, mitigations, actions can companies take to try and mitigate this overall effect?
Yeah. Before that, the start of the war, especially in the February and before that in the January, we can see daily between 120 to 140 tanker passing through the Strait of Hormuz, and we can see more fertilizer and helium and LNG and oil through GCC to the consumer side. I mean, for the European market and East Asia, and we cannot see any disruption, and we can see stability in the market from the commodity to the oil as well. Repeating your question, at present, some country will be able to use military escort to transit some goods, especially oil and LNG, to the Strait of Hormuz to reach the European and also East Asian market. But as I mentioned, the second question, we have no more option on the table for consumer side and from the producer side. Without that, the deal between Iran and the US, without the official end of the war, we cannot expect it to see stability in the market. We cannot see that all tankers in the region will be passed safely through Strait of Hormuz and reach the market in the short term.
And do you think this crisis has caused people to think about, to try and push for a diversification, different routes, different pipelines? Because it does seem that the world is tremendously reliant on just this one very small piece of water, doesn't it?
Yes, it's a great question. As you know, about 20 million barrels per day, I mean, 1/5 of daily consumed through pass from the Strait of Hormuz. You know, it's you cannot find an alternative to supply 20 million barrels per day and safely reach the consumer side, especially East Asia, China, South Korea, and Japan as well. And whereas energy project is a long-term project, without that finding that reliable financial capability, and without that solving that the geopolitical, I mean, such trade, geopolitical risk, until you cannot find investor to invest in this area. And 2 days ago, you know that a Fujira facility targeted by the Iranian drone, and it has a clear message. Any attempt to bypass the Hormuz Strait will be targeted. And due to such situation, I think it's very hard to find that the private sector or government, any government or financial organization to be a financial provider for such project. At present, we have Saudi Arabia East-West pipeline. We will be able to about 5 million barrels per day to Red Sea Yamba port, and we have also Fujira facility in the UAE, and also last week Iraq will be able to use railroad infrastructure in the Syria to transport some oil to the European market. Altogether, if we can see operational totally, it's about this 8 to 9 million barrel per day, and we have also 11 million barrel per day shortage, and it's not easy for all countries to find the alternative. And as I mentioned, due to energy project is a long-term project without solving that it heals this problem. I mean, financial capability, and also the most important is a geopolitical threat. You cannot be optimistic about the future of such alternative project, especially from the pipeline perspective.
Yes, Dr. Shokri, thank you very much indeed. Great to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, after the break, we'll take a look at how Europe's growing role in the South Caucasus is reshaping regional power, and why the real leverage may still lie in Baku. Don't go away. A warm welcome back wherever you're watching Primetime. Tbilisi announced a major push to position itself as the region's essential transit corridor with new railway, road, airport and port projects. Our correspondent Nini Nikolashvili has the story.
The centerpiece of Georgia's ambitions is the Anaklia deep-water port on the Black Sea. Alongside it, a rebuilt national railway, expressways completed by 2030, and a brand new Tbilisi International Airport by 2031, capable of handling 18 million passengers per year. Prime Minister Irakli Kabakhidze presented this as Georgia's bid to become a genuine hub between Europe and Asia. Parliament Speaker Shawa Papashvili added that whatever investor comes on board, the Georgian state will hold a 51% controlling stake in Anaklia. The problem is that Anaklia has been stalled for 6 years. Its original American-backed developer walked away in 2020, and no replacement has been found since. Opposition politician Irakli Kopradze put it bluntly. The government drove out Western investors, failed to bring in anyone else, and neither serious capital nor Western partners trusted enough to commit. The government says that negotiations are ongoing. What makes all of this more pressing is what is happening next door. In Yerevan this week, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen signed a new connectivity partnership with Armenia, praising its Crossroads of Peace plan as a genuine bridge between Europe, South Caucasus and Central Asia. In Baku, EU foreign policy chief Kaya Kallas met President Aliyev, calling Azerbaijan a reliable energy partner and signaling a deeper structured relationship ahead. Azerbaijan gas is already flowing to Germany and Austria. Brussels is actively rewiring its South Caucasus relationships, but Georgia is not part of that conversation right now. Relations with the EU have been frozen since Tbilisi passed legislation Brussels compared to Russian-style foreign agent laws, and there is no sign of movement on either side. That leaves Georgia in an uncomfortable position. Ambitious infrastructure plans, but no political partnership to anchor them. Good roads and new port can still attract trade, but without closer ties with its biggest potential partner, Georgia risks being a corridor that others root around. Nini Nikolashvili, Tbilisi, A News.
The EU's first summit with Armenia marks a political step forward for Yerevan. But does it change the strategic balance in the South Caucasus? Well, as Brussels deepens ties with Armenia while maintaining key links with Azerbaijan, the regional equation remains complicated. Joining me now is our Deputy Editor-in-Chief, Orkan Amashov. Orkan, great to see you. In your honour, we have a map of the region here behind us. Orkan, strip away this sort of summit rhetoric and language for us. Did Armenia actually gain something tangible, something strategic here?
I think most certainly Armenia did gain something incredibly invaluable in this particular context. Armenia is not going to be a member of European Union anytime soon, but being a country with an aspiration to join European Union is one thing. Being a candidate country is a completely different thing. This particular EPC, European Political Committee's 8th Summit, and EU-Armenia bilateral summit taking place almost simultaneously, just 1 month before the crucial pivotal parliamentary elections early June in Armenia, was meant to be very supportive of Prime Minister Pashinyan's pro-European policy. Therefore, of course, naturally, it's not just symbolic, but there are massive political implications as well. Armenia wants to diversify away from Russia, basically. They realized over the past few years, in particular after 2020, after the defeat in the war of Karabakh, that relying on Russia is not good enough. You're not necessarily supposed to replace Russia with somebody else, but you need to diversify away by retaining Russia there in your wider landscape of military, political, financial structure, but gradually giving other countries more space there. And EU is a key player, United States should play an important role as well. And this summit is a very clear reflection of that. When we talk about clearly the nature of the EU-Armenia relations, the current relations are based on comprehensive and enhanced partnership agreement. There's no free trade agreement, of course. There's no question of Armenia joining the customs regime of the European Union. But there is a strategic partnership which was fundamentally adopted in December 2025. And now Armenia has got this strategic dialogue with the European Union in the fields of connectivity, energy, and many other areas, including, of course, border security. So the question here is that this matters a great deal because something very extraordinarily important happening in this region, and this map is very good to have in front of us to be able to reflect upon. The peace deal with Azerbaijan, a normalization with Turkey, means that Armenia, through Turkey, will be able to gain access to European markets, and Europe will be able to gain access to Armenia. And that provides Armenia with a realistic possibility to limit the influence of Eurasian Economic Union and Russia, basically, because Armenia's economy currently is inextricably and in many fundamental ways connected with Russia-dominated economic union. Armenia does not have land border with Russia, but through Georgia and Azerbaijan there is a trade connection, of course. Considerable, preponderant part of Armenia's trade turnover is connected with Russia. To limit that, you're not supposed to say Russia is bad, I'm not going to have any trade with Russia, because you're so reliant on Russia. What you do, you're gradually moving towards a new situation wherein Armenia is less reliant on Russia. I think it's not about replacing Russia, but diversifying away Russia. And this summit is very, very crucial. It's crucial for Armenia's strategic pivot, which is connected with the Azerbaijan-Armenian peace process. And number two, for Pashinyan himself.
Very interesting that you mentioned Azerbaijan there, because of course we're seeing more overt, more open support for Armenia from the EU. At the same time though, of course, Orkan, Azerbaijan has material energy-based relationships, key strategic relationships with the EU. Are those two things a coherent strategy, or are there elements of it being sort of a slightly contradictory approach from the EU?
I think there was an element of contradiction before. When you formulate a foreign policy in connection with a certain region, you're not supposed to use one country against another within that region. And that was Azerbaijan's concern before this very point. I think some elements of that concern are still there. And in particular, we see it in connection with the European Union monitoring mission stationed alongside the Armenian-Azerbaijani border on the Armenian side. But when it comes to the crux of Armenia-EU strategic dialogue today, I think Azerbaijan is gradually finding that cooperation as more in line with its own national interests as well. Basically, seeing Armenia, which is less reliant on Russia, being able to act on a more self-sufficient footing is something Azerbaijan would be very much interested in seeing in the fullness of time. Azerbaijan's role is different, and Azerbaijan is absolutely indispensable because this region, you see, is relatively small, but strategically located. You've got Georgia there with access to Black Sea, and currently due to strain in EU Tbilisi relationship, Georgia is not as central to the thinking of policymakers in Brussels. Therefore, focus has been on Azerbaijan and Armenia. And that's the reason why when they talk about new diplomatic reality, they mean Azerbaijan, Armenia, Turkey. And these three countries provide vital link connecting Europe with Caspian. As I mentioned last time, without Azerbaijan, you would not be able to gain access to Caspian. So you need either Georgia, Azerbaijan together, or you need Armenia, Azerbaijan together. But all the time, in both cases, you need Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan's role is very different to Armenia's role, but together they could play an important role as a vital middle corridor infrastructure there. Azerbaijan provides energy, and 25 BCM annually. This is very important. Azerbaijan plays a crucial role in the energy supply structure of the southeastern Europe, the Western Balkans and so forth. Azerbaijan is capable of playing a very pragmatic role in terms of providing certainty for EU markets and also clarity of strategic thinking in this region. But Armenia on its own would not be of any use if you don't have Armenia-Azerbaijan relationship. I think the EU-Azerbaijan and EU-Armenia relations could be complementary. And the reason why these two bilateral ties could now be complementary because there's no conflict between Azerbaijan and Armenia anymore. And that provides EU with greater opportunities. Hence, we heard from Marta Kos, EU Enlargement Commissioner, about quadrilateral format involving Azerbaijan, Armenia, Turkey, and EU itself. Quite often we see that Georgia is being sidelined. Georgia is being effectively punished for its current course, which is being perceived as being pro-Russian, and Georgian policymakers, of course, dispute that particular term. So it could be complementary, back to your original question.
And where is the EU on that latest point, this punishment, this perception of Georgia? Has that changed at all in recent months? Or
We've seen some contacts involving French President Emmanuel Macron and Prime Minister Kobachidze over the past few months. But perception of Georgia in Brussels and many European capitals is very strangely and uniformed. It's being perceived as pursuing pro-Russian foreign policy, although Georgia, up until today, considers 20% of its territory, which is currently under Russian occupation, according to international law, as Russia-occupied territory. There's no formal diplomatic relationship. But simultaneously there are economic ties, of course. That is not changing, but I think there is a growing sense amongst European policymakers that instead of punishing Georgia, perhaps what is being created and designed between Azerbaijan and Armenia today could also potentially involve Georgia in the fullness of time. The reality is that we got middle corridor infrastructure on the ground, and that involves Baku, Tbilisi, Ceyhan, Baku, Tbilisi, Erzurum. Baku, Tbilisi, Ceyhan, of course, and Tbilisi, Erzurum is the first leg of Southern Gas Corridor. And you've got oil pipeline, you've got railway system. So Georgia is indispensable there. You cannot change facts on the ground. Adding Armenia to that wider landscape would increase Europe's clout in this region, but you cannot simply replace Armenia with Georgia. They should act as complementary legs of Caucasian middle corridor geography, wherein Azerbaijan is absolutely indispensable, because from Armenia you don't get access to Caspian, from Georgia you need Azerbaijan under all circumstances. So that is not changing, but some inceptional signs of potential future change have been noticed.
Now, we saw Monsieur Macron enjoying himself in Armenia, even taking to the piano and singing at one point. The French support for Armenia has been there for many, many years. What is the attitude in Paris towards this region now? Do you get any sense that it's changing at all? Does it differ at all from the current EU position?
France, position maintained by France as a nation state and position maintained by Brussels have not always been in line, but clearly France tried to influence EU policy. And there was one stage during the Armenian-Azerbaijani peace process towards the end of 2022 and beginning of 2023, that format called Brussels format, mediated by Charles Michel, was on the verge of collapse because of French influence. France is very pro-Armenian in that particular sense, but France eventually, I think, as a country, found itself sort of compelled to come to terms with the realities established on the ground. Because let's go back to 2020. After when the 10th of November declaration was announced, there was a ceasefire deal after the Karabakh war. French President Emmanuel Macron said that we will not allow Azerbaijan to conquer the Upper Karabakh. Using that sort of language, Karabakh is Azerbaijani territory. You wouldn't occupy your own country, of course. That was a moment. Lowest ebb in Azerbaijan-France relations. And that continued their support. But after September 2023, in particular 2024, we realized that once Azerbaijan and Armenia themselves found a compromise, with this process becoming eventually purely bilateral, and then of course peace deal being initialed, first finalized in February and initialed in August 2025. France itself found itself in a position that being more Armenian than Armenians themselves would actually hurt French interest in this region. Interestingly enough, France now is sort of coming to terms with the construction here. One interesting moment about President Emmanuel Macron, as you know, he attended EPC on the 4th of May. I'm not entirely sure to what extent it was part of EU-Armenia bilateral summit, because that was a summit involving Armenia as a country and EU as an institution, not individual member countries. But 5th of May was officially his state visit to Armenia, and he wanted to leave Armenia, according to the information which is presently circulating in the media, via the land border through Turkey. So allow me to explain to you the sensitivity involved in that particular situation. Currently, Turkish-Armenian border is closed. You see that border, it's not 1,000-kilometer border like Azerbaijan-Armenian border, but it's also quite extensive border. Currently, that border is closed. According to the latest agreement between Turkey and Armenia, they agreed on opening the land border for third-party individuals and diplomatic passport holders, but there's no land border movement there. Flights, of course, naturally, they've been for some considerable time, but there's no land border movement there. Land border is closed, basically. He wanted, as a symbolic move, according to the information circulating in the media, to cross that border and to go to Turkey, and as if to demonstrate that I am here a man of consequence. I'm the first person who actually crossed this border after this border being closed for 30 years. I think he wanted to leave his mark on the international stage and add to that a reputation that he garnered and he cultivated in front of the world on the 4th of May, when he was a very dominant figure there at the 8th summit of the APC, and then state visit being a resounding success in many ways. And he wanted to add another element, crossing the Turkish-Armenian border and saying that the border is now open, and I did it. What happened? Turkey rejected this proposal, although we know that initially some Turkish officials, presumably, I can imagine, I can only guess here, and it's a sort of a very sensible and responsible conjecture of mine, that Serdar Kılıç, the gentleman who is responsible for Turkish-Armenian normalization on the part of Turkey, might have seen in that idea some virtue and might have supported it, but the President of Turkey, of course, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, rejected this proposal. And why? Because, first of all, everything must be communicated to Azerbaijan, and Azerbaijan's acquiescence is key. Azerbaijani-Armenian peace process and Turkish-Armenian normalization are inextricably connected with each other. Nothing will happen in the domain of Turkish-Armenian normalization without considerable movement here in the Azerbaijan-Armenian peace process. Therefore, Azerbaijan must have been consulted. It would have been a wrong move, because it would have been untimely move. But Macron decided. So if you go back to the original question of yours, President Macron now is a more constructive figure from the perspective of Azerbaijani policymakers.
Yes.
But even within that constructive spirit, there is still an element of a type of a behavior which goes against the sensibility, which is so close to the crux of Azerbaijani-Armenian peace process and Turkish-Armenian normalization. He wanted to do something that would have gone against that concurrence of these two processes, which Azerbaijan, of course, to which Azerbaijan reacted in a way that it did react, as a result of which he failed to cross the border.
Constructive spirit, but certain elements that are disruptive. I mean, you could almost say the same thing about the EU's attitude towards Azerbaijan. I mean, we've seen, haven't we, at the EPC?
The feeling there is that there's something inherently anti-Azerbaijani there, which seems to have been curbed and contained for the time being.
But not in all parts of the EU.
Yeah, of course.
And particularly the Parliament has been the area, hasn't it, that's caused the problem, that's caused the tension.
Yeah.
And yet the other elements of the institution seem to be moving forward with some degree of reasonableness. Just give us a sense of the disparity between the two.
My original statement was about French President Emmanuel Macron's behavior, about something there is still problematic and being curbed and contained. Regarding EU-Azerbaijan relations are on a pragmatic footing as things stand now. EU Council President Antonio Costa was in Azerbaijan early March, and I was there to report and analyze myself in the presidential palace. Atmospherics were one of absolute positivity. There was no doubt about that. President Aliyev, in his historic address to the 8th summit of APC, praised Antonio Costa, Council, said nice words, I think, about Ursula von der Leyen. So Council, Commission, the relations with those institutions are perfectly okay. The problem Azerbaijan has a problem with two institutions. One of them is inside the European Union, that is Parliament, European Parliament. The other one is the PASE, which is the Parliamentary Assembly of Council of Europe, which is another institution which is not part of the European Union. But the problem there is that since May 2021, that was after the war, but before the full restoration of Azerbaijan's sovereignty over the rest of Karabakh, European Parliament adopted 14 resolutions about the Azerbaijani-Armenian peace process in a unilaterally, unquestioningly pro-Armenian style, accusing Azerbaijan of all sorts of things. Of course, we can go to those resolutions, we can have different opinions about them, but the reality is that Azerbaijan sees in that certain degree of bias. And of course, naturally, those resolutions did not benefit the Azerbaijan-Armenian peace process in any reasonable way. And then, at a time when Azerbaijan and Armenia removed certain subjects from their peace agenda discussions, they are bringing some issues back. They bring the issue of the return of the former residents of Karabakh to Azerbaijan. This is a matter for Azerbaijan to decide. Armenia itself is saying that we're not really interested in that. This is not part of the peace agenda. And if Armenians of Karabakh, former Armenian residents of Karabakh, go back to Karabakh, according to Azerbaijan-Armenian understanding, then some Azerbaijanis who were forced to leave southern Armenia and many other parts of Armenia will need to go back. That creates a new uncertainty. We don't need that. So Armenia is saying, I don't need that, but European Parliament is saying that is something very important. That puts a complexion on the peace agenda. And also the issue revolving around those Armenians who are sentenced here in Azerbaijan, the figures associated with the former separatist regime there. Armenia does not say anything about them, but the European Parliament is saying. The impression given is that at a time when these two countries are on the verge of signing a peace deal, with the 7th of June parliamentary elections being absolutely crucial, there are certain forces which seem to be in a position of intending on slackening this. And who are those forces? We see some Russia-supported elements inside Armenia, so opposition. We see Russia itself, certain circles within Russia. We see European Parliament, which is part of the European Union. Azerbaijan has got absolutely fantastic relations with the European Union, but European Parliament is a different story. We've got Armenian-American diaspora. So one wonders, and we have the person of Luis Moreno Compa, who just emerged. Allegations are apparently piling up. I don't know what will happen next, but it seems that it looks like a big story. You see this conglomeration, sort of alliance of forces in different jurisdictions acting against Prime Minister Pashinyan and against Azerbaijan-Armenian peace process. In that particular context, European Parliament looks like part of the war party.
Orkan, it is always a great pleasure to have you. Thank you very much.
Entirely mine. A nice map.
Thank you. Okay, after the break, we'll take a look at the top business news stories of the day with Andy Mioch. Don't go away. Welcome back to Primetime. Good to have you with us. Now, Andy Mioch is here with the very latest business news stories. Andy, what have you got on your agenda tonight?
Well, Guy, the news of a possible US-Iran deal on the horizon sent oil prices plummeting. Asia got its second ever $1 trillion worth company, and there's also some earnings reports and forecasts across industries. So let's dive right in. First up, the price of oil dropped sharply after reports that the United States and Iran could be close to agreeing on a deal to end the war that has caused the largest energy supply disruption in history.
International benchmark Brent crude futures tumbled about 6% to $103 per barrel as of 8:19 a.m. Eastern Time, while US West Texas Intermediate futures traded at $95. This follows reports that the US and Iran are nearing a deal to end the conflict. According to Axios, US officials believe a preliminary agreement could soon be reached, outlining a framework for broader nuclear talks. Reuters reported, citing a Pakistani source, that the US and Iran are getting closer to an initial peace deal. US President Donald Trump also said the US would temporarily halt Project Freedom, a military operation launched to escort vessels through the Strait of Hormuz, citing progress in negotiations. The administration noted that about 23,000 seafarers from 87 countries remain stranded in the Persian Gulf due to the disruption. Despite easing tensions, elevated energy costs have already started to weigh on global demand. And even if the Strait reopens, a full recovery in shipping and trade flows is expected to take several weeks.
Samsung Electronics has joined the $1 trillion club thanks to the AI boom. It's just crossed $1 trillion market valuation for the first time, making it only the second Asian company ever to hit that mark after chipmaker TSMC.
The market capitalization of Samsung Electronics common stock surpassed $1 trillion on Wednesday, making it the second Asian company after TSMC to reach the milestone. Samsung Electronics, the world's top memory chip maker, saw its market value reach 1,500 trillion won, or just above $1 trillion in early trading in Seoul on Wednesday, tracking sharp gains of AI-related stocks in the US overnight. Shares of the South Korean chip giant were up 12% at 9:52 a.m. in Seoul, outstripping the benchmark Kospi's 5.4% gain. The S&P 500 and the Nasdaq notched record high closes on Tuesday, lifted by Intel and other AI-related stocks as a US-Iran ceasefire held and investors focused on strong quarterly earnings.
In aviation news, German airline Lufthansa kept its 2026 outlook despite a $2 billion jet fuel hit to costs. The company said it would introduce higher fares and cut costs, sending shares up.
Lufthansa held its 2026 profit outlook on Wednesday. The German airline pledged to offset a $2 billion jet fuel hit to costs through hedging, higher fares and cost cuts. The news sent shares up even as labour strikes cloud the year ahead. The airline said the crisis in the Middle East, which had sent jet fuel prices surging due to a drop in supply, was boosting demand as travellers rerouted via its hub, although the carrier is preparing for potential disruptions. It has already cut 20,000 flights this summer to limit capacity amid jet fuel shortage worries. Lufthansa reported an adjusted operating loss of $717 million in the January to March period. It's a better result compared to analyst projections and an improvement from a year ago. European airlines are expected to be shielded from the initial fallout of the jet fuel shock in the first quarter, though some, like Air France, have adjusted their outlooks with jet fuel prices set to remain high. Lufthansa's chief financial officer said the outlook would be maintained, provided there are no fuel supply bottlenecks or further strikes. Elsewhere, the airline's cabin crew and pilot unions called for strikes throughout April, which cost the airline around $176 million. Lufthansa issued 2 profit warnings in 2024 due to costs linked to labour disruptions.
Over to the auto industry, BMW reported a sharp drop in first quarter earnings as intense competition in China and tariff pressures weighed on performance, although it maintained its 2026 outlook for now.
BMW held its financial guidance for this year on Wednesday. The German automaker also signaled it could cope with US tariffs and Chinese competition. That was despite BMW reporting a sharp drop in first quarter earnings as pre-tax profit fell 25%. The carmaker beat key profit expectations for the period, even though a narrowing core margin showed the pressure BMW faced. The company reported first quarter pre-tax earnings at $2.7 billion, ahead of analyst forecasts, although group revenue missed expectations and was down just over 8% to around $26.7 billion. BMW's faced similar pressure to start the year as rivals Mercedes-Benz and Audi. The auto giants have faced the threat of higher US tariffs, while Chinese competitors have built market share in Europe and grown in their home market. BMW has pursued cost cuts to offset tariff pressure and expensive raw materials like most of its rivals, but it hasn't cut jobs so far, unlike at other German carmakers, Volkswagen and Mercedes. Looking ahead, BMW held its full-year guidance on Wednesday and forecast a moderate decline in its group result. BMW's core operating margin is seen in a range of 4% to 6% after last year's 5.3%. The outlook didn't include a potential rise in US auto tariffs. Wednesday's update helped investors believe BMW is well placed to deal with a volatile global auto market. Shares were up around 7% in early trade.
In pharma news, obesity and diabetes drug maker Novo Nordisk said surging demand for its new weight loss pill means it will beat forecasts, sending its shares soaring. The Danish company had high hopes for its Wegovy pill as it tries to recover lost ground in its battle with rival Eli Lilly.
Novo Nordisk beat first quarter profit forecasts on Wednesday and raised its full-year outlook. It saw stronger than expected sales of its new obesity pill to help close the gap with rival Eli Lilly. The Danish drug maker reported adjusted operating profit at $5.1 billion, well above forecasts, while adjusted group sales came in at $11 billion in the quarter, also above expectations. Novo has bet on its Wegovy weight loss pill to compete with Lilly and offset pressure from intense price competition. Its time as the only oral obesity pill in the US market closed in early April as Lilly won regulatory approval for rival drug Foundayo. Total prescriptions for the Wegovy pill reached about 1.3 million in the first quarter and hit more than 2 million since its January launch. Sales of the pill reached around $355 million, nearly double analyst forecasts. Looking ahead, Novo also slightly improved its full-year outlook. The firm forecast adjusted sales and operating profit declines of 4% to 12% at constant exchange rates. That was above a previous range of -5% to -13%. Wednesday's results were an improvement on a difficult year for the firm, where it's faced weaker than expected sales and disappointing trial results. Its shares are down around 40% over the last 12 months, but investors liked what they heard from the company Wednesday, and shares jumped more than 7% in early trade.
And finally, in the ride-hailing industry, Uber shares are up after the company forecasts second quarter results above estimates. The company's international expansion and strong delivery demand in foreign markets have helped power its growth.
Uber Technologies forecast second quarter bookings above Wall Street estimates on Wednesday on strong demand for ride-hailing and delivery services, even though the Middle East conflict weighed on its growth. Shares of the San Francisco-based company rose about 9% in pre-market trading. The strong forecast is a sign that the company's strategy of keeping prices steady while pushing into higher margin areas, such as its platform for businesses, are paying off, helping it navigate higher fuel costs and geopolitical tensions. Strong delivery demand in international markets, including Australia, and expansion into new geographies such as Denmark have also helped power growth. Uber said it expects gross bookings of $56.2 billion to $57.7 billion for the June quarter, above analysts' average estimate of $56 billion, according to data compiled by LSEG.
And that is a wrap on the business brief for tonight. Back to you, Guy.
Andy, as always, thank you very much indeed. Okay, after the break, we will take a look at the latest strikes in the Gaza Strip and what they could mean for an already fragile ceasefire. Don't go away. Welcome back. You're watching Primetime. Well, the ceasefire may still exist on paper, but on the ground in the Gaza Strip, the violence has not stopped. Fresh Israeli strikes have added to an already devastating toll, with local health authorities reporting more than 72,000 Palestinians killed since the war began. Well, the latest attacks are again raising questions over whether the truce is holding or simply unraveling in plain sight.
Tensions remain high in the Middle East as Israel continues its operations in Gaza. The Palestinian death toll has now reached 72,615, according to health authorities in the territory. More than 172,000 people have been injured since the conflict between Hamas and Israel began on October the 7th, 2023. Officials say at least 3 people were killed and 9 others wounded in the past 24 hours. Among the latest incidents was an Israeli strike on a police station in Gaza City on May 5th, where a 15-year-old boy was killed and several others were injured.
He sells bread to feed his siblings. He has 15 people to feed. Nobody feels for us. If we go hungry, if we die, if we are killed, nobody feels. What did this child do to deserve being hit while selling bread?
We suddenly heard a blast. I ran outside and found the police station had been hit. I looked and saw people lying on the ground, martyrs and wounded. I started moving and putting them in the car. We came here with a martyr. When will the war stop?
Earlier the same day, other Israeli strikes killed at least 2 more Palestinians, according to local health officials. There has been no immediate comment from Israel on the incidents. Israel has intensified strikes on Gaza's police force, saying it is used by Hamas to maintain control. Violence has continued almost daily despite the ceasefire, with both sides accusing each other of violations. According to Gaza's health authorities, more than 800 Palestinians have been killed and over 2,300 injured since the truce took effect in October 2025.
Well, joining me now is Massimiliano De Amore, founder of the Red Zone in Rotterdam, a geopolitical risk platform tracking conflict patterns, strategic escalation and battlefield developments. Massimiliano, thank you very much indeed for joining us on Primetime tonight. We keep hearing the word ceasefire, don't we? The tempo of violence, though, suggests something quite different. From your perspective, what phase of the war are we actually in now?
Well, as you said, the term ceasefire is now meaningless. It does not reflect the operational reality. For all these months, Israel has been trying to actively targeted with specific operations, police infrastructures, and tunnels inside the Gaza Strip. The problem with Israel is its inability to close war fronts, like we are seeing now in Lebanon. There is a continuous exchange of kinetic action between the two parties, and there will be most likely a war of attrition that will last for weeks and even months.
Yeah, as you mentioned there, from the Israeli perspective, they say that their focus is on Hamas-linked command and internal security structures. What is your sense of the current Israeli strategy in that regard?
So, as I said previously, now Israel is trying to dismantle the governance structure that Hamas is actively managing right now. There has been some indication from the Shin Bet in intelligence of a presence of roughly 10,000 Hamas officers within the Gaza Strip. They are unarmed officers in Navy uniform and mostly manage the traffic of goods, the market, and displaced person settlements. So we are performing these functions in order to manage and sort of control the civilian order usual maintenance.
Yes.
But there is a rippling effect. Indeed, this is creating a sort of paradox where Israel is trying to eliminate the only form of actual governance inside the Gaza Strip. So by eliminating this sort of para-statal entities of Hamas, there is a sort of power vacuum that is being filled by lots of militias and a proxy that actually create a very thriving place to start for Hamas in order to reorganize from a military standpoint.
Yeah, very interesting governance paradox, as you put it. Very interesting point. When you look at the strike patterns over recent weeks. Do you see any shift, any change in Israeli tactics at all?
So Israel is trying to maintain operational tempo without triggering escalation threshold. So we're trying to carry out these low effort operations in order to maintain a sort of a sense of control over the area. We need to remember that now the Gaza Strip is being controlled by Hamas for the roughly 47%. So Israel is applying its governance only on the remaining part, roughly 53%. Israel is also having a lot of operational constraints, mainly in terms of military overextension. Indeed, it has progressively reduced its military endurance in the Gaza Strip due to the need to maintain 5 active divisions within the Lebanese front, and also to have some resources for the Iran theater. Then the IDF is facing a big problem with Hezbollah new optic fiber drones, and so this creates a need to focus on the northern front in a greater way with respect to the Gaza Strip.
Now, of course, there are deep ideological differences that, of course, will endure, but so much operationally, strategically has changed, hasn't it, in recent months. What do you think success for both sides actually looks like now?
So, this is a very difficult question because we need to state from which perspective are we talking to. So if we talk about Israel, it's a strategic failure. Indeed, even with the high civil and human cost of this operation, as you were indicating before, Hamas is still active. Roughly before the war, there were 40,000 active soldiers. Now there are 27,000. They actually organizing and restructuring under the tunnels. And therefore, for Hamas, the only goal now is to prolong this war in order to get to an inflection point where the political cost and also the financial resources to maintain this operation exceed Israel political willingness, international pressure, and operational capabilities.
Mr. Diamore, we appreciate your analysis. Good to have you on the show. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, after the break, we take a look at whether ceasefire diplomacy in Ukraine can survive another deadly escalation. Don't go away. Welcome back to Primetime. Well, a ceasefire is supposed to create space for diplomacy. But tonight in Ukraine, the violence is raising new doubts about whether that space exists at all. Fresh Russian strikes just hours before a proposed pause in fighting have sharpened questions over whether either side is any closer to a real break in the war.
Ukrainian officials say Russian attacks have killed dozens of people across multiple regions, hours before a proposed ceasefire was due to begin. The heaviest strike was reported in Zaporizhia, where authorities say aerial bombs and drones killed at least 12 people and injured around 20, damaging residential areas and sparking fires.
There was a cynical strike on facilities in the city of Zaporizhia with 4 guided aerial bombs. The enemy intentionally began attacking those locations with Shahed drones. For a very long time, emergency services and municipal services were unable to approach the location.
In Kramatorsk, officials say 5 people were killed and 12 injured, while in Dnipro, authorities reported between 3 and 4 deaths, with several others wounded. In the Poltava region, a strike on gas production facilities reportedly killed 4 people. Separately, officials in the northern Chernihiv region say a drone strike hit the city centre, injuring 3 people and setting an administrative building and nearby vehicles on fire. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has criticised the limited pause, saying it is not enough to halt attacks for only a short period. Russia has not commented on the latest Ukrainian claims. Meanwhile, Russian state media reported that a Ukrainian drone strike killed 2 people in the Chuvashia region. Ukraine has proposed an open-ended ceasefire starting at midnight, urging Russia to reciprocate. Moscow has announced a separate truce for May 8th and 9th, linked to World War II commemorations.
So while both sides talk about a pause, the bigger question is whether anyone actually believes it will hold. From ordinary people in Russia to civilians living under daily attacks in Ukraine, the reaction is strikingly similar: skepticism, fear, and a growing sense that promises on paper may not survive the reality on the ground.
President Vladimir Putin has declared a 2-day ceasefire for May 8th and 9th to mark the end of World War II. In response, President Volodymyr Zelensky countered with his own proposal for a pause starting even earlier. But on the streets of Moscow, the mood is a mix of anxiety and defiance. While some feel secure, others question if enough is being done to protect them.
I also feel that our authorities and leadership don't do enough in protecting us. There is no sense being in constant stress, because if something strikes on me, it will just strike, and I can do nothing with it. But the authorities can.
Other Russians remain defiant, believing their military defenses will hold regardless of any formal agreement.
I think it is unlikely that Zelensky will keep the ceasefire. Everything that flew before will fly, but we have the sense of security. I think they will repel everything and everything will be good.
In Kiev, Zelensky dismissed the Russian offer as utter cynicism following deadly overnight strikes. Distrust among Ukrainians remains absolute.
Putin cannot be trusted. He won't actually do anything he promises. The truce will be such that we are not going to not bomb the Red Square.
For those under daily bombardment, the desire for a pause is overshadowed by the fear of further provocations.
I would like to see a ceasefire, to see the war end. Because when you live under attacks every day, it's impossible to believe what they say. But I would like to believe it.
Moscow and Kiev remain locked in a diplomatic standoff as May 9th approaches. With neither side trusting the other's intent, the prospects for a functional ceasefire on the ground remain low.
Well, for more on whether this proposed pause has any real chance of holding and what it tells us about where this war is heading, let's bring in now Maria Ulvianowska, a correspondent at Independence Avenue Media, joining us now from Washington, D.C. Maria, great to have you with us. Thanks for joining us on Primetime. This proposed pause then, what's your point of view? Does it feel like a serious attempt to stop the fighting or more just sort of political theatre?
Well, Ukrainian side definitely sees this more like a political theater rather than real negotiations. And first of all, let's take a look at how this ceasefire was proposed by Russia unilaterally, not in conversation with Ukraine. Putin did it with speaking with the American president, at the same time undermining the Ukrainian agency on this issue. So that's the first thing. The second one is that Putin's short-term ceasefire proposals are not actual truce. Russia has announced such short-term ceasefires multiple times. The latest one was during the Orthodox Easter just a couple of weeks ago in April. And the trend is that Russia violates the ceasefire that it announces itself And if we take the Easter ceasefire that Russia proposed, Ukrainian side said that it was violated more than 10,000 times, according to the Ukraine's general staff. So Russia consistently acts in bad faith, not respecting even its own truths that it announces unilaterally. And with that history, Ukraine brought in new tactics. Ukraine suggested to start a ceasefire a little bit early, just to see if it can hold, if anything would work. And as we've seen of this morning, it didn't. Ukraine has already stated that by 10 a.m. Russia has violated this proposed by Ukraine ceasefire more than 1,800 times. So Ukraine says it sees no point in upholding the ceasefire for the military parade in Moscow. So, and even before this Ukrainian ceasefire started, Russia has launched one of the deadliest attacks on Ukrainian civilians, Ukrainian cities, not showing any wish to bring more peace, to engage in any meaningful negotiations around the ceasefire, around truce, around bringing peace to this deadly war. So from Kyiv's perspective, it definitely looks more like diplomacy, like messaging exercise, and less like a regular path towards peace.
Yeah, as you say, Moscow proposing 2 days, Ukraine obviously wanting something longer. What would it take for some kind of ceasefire to stick then? Is it, as you say, just this rejection of what Kyiv sees as a sort of a trick, a tactic for these very short ceasefire proposals?
So it's both a strategic difference and a messaging difference, I would say. So if we take Ukraine, when Ukraine is speaking about ceasefire, President Zelensky always stresses on the human costs of this war. He says that he's willing to test broader ceasefire and move toward a long-term solution. But the most important thing Ukraine says is to reduce the human cost of this war, these deadly attacks on civilians. When Russia talks about ceasefire, it's talking about it more symbolically and politically. And analysts say that this time Kremlin wants to project a view of itself as a peacemaker, as a very humane leader. Putin wants to be seen as like that by his own people. But at the same time, it's all directed towards the United States leader, towards Donald Trump, with whom Putin spoke right before he announced the ceasefire for the military parade. And Putin just wants Putin wants Donald Trump to see that Putin wants peace, even though if it's a simple theater exercise, and impress his own people as a humane, noble leader. But as we see, Putin doesn't really care for that, and he continues deadly attacks before the ceasefire was announced, during the ceasefire. And Russia, again, I cannot stress this more, Russia has violated every single ceasefire that it has announced on its own.
And difficult position for President Zelensky, of course, too. You know, after more of these deadly strikes, how hard is it for Ukrainian leadership to sell any sort of ceasefire idea to the public right now?
The thing is, you don't have to sell the idea of ceasefire to the Ukrainian people. We've heard it ourselves just moments ago when you showed the story from Ukrainian cities. People want ceasefire. People want the bombings to stop. People have been living in these inhumane conditions for more than 4 years at this point, living every day like it's the last day. Every day you can be hit by a rocket and your life will end. And we see the statistics of deaths and its lives, its families, its stories of these people, right? So you don't need to sell this to people. And according to the latest polls in Ukraine, more than 57% of Ukrainians are against changing the Donetsk region in return to the security guarantees that countries propose. And that is the main problem, is that there is no trust in any security guarantees anymore. There is no trust in good faith of other actors around this war. And that's the biggest trend of this year, that Ukraine and Ukrainians stop looking at allies as much and take their destiny in their own hands and enhance the production of military equipment and enhance the attacks deeper into Russian territory. That is why the military parade was cancelled in Moscow. So Ukraine realized at this point that it should count on itself, and one of the biggest changes from 2022, 2023, 24 is that now Ukraine understands that it has to become its own best ally, and it has to count on its own more than it can count on the partners, because partners tend to change, and tactics of partners and friendships within these partnerships can also change.
Maria, you're obviously in Washington right now. Is Ukraine still getting the same level of attention in the capital, or is there a sense that political focus may have shifted elsewhere?
That is a tough question, and we definitely see the war fatigue in general. And on top of that, we see the fatigue of general news cycle by American people. It's really hard to follow all the updates of everything that's happening every day. And to put on top of that the war in Iran and how it influences directly the American consumers, people see that their gas increase, they see that affordability is becoming a bigger problem. So I've been to Congress recently talking to different congressmen and women and senators with the Ukrainian Action Summit, the Advocacy Week of Ukrainian Congress. And so the people who are advocating for Ukraine were trying to bring up 3 small issues to Congress's attention. The first and the most important one was sanctions against Russian energy systems, against Russian oil that we know have been lifted recently. And the answer in Congress is the same. We cannot do anything right now because it's the election year, because it's midterms are coming, and all the attention is shifted from all the international issues, foreign issues, towards what matters for American people most. And the biggest issue, as we know right now, is affordability, is to end the war with Iran that is not supported by most of the American voters. And so all the focus is now on the domestic issues.
That's what matters most to American voters. What matters most to Ukraine right now, Maria? Is it military support? Is it sanctions on Russia, as you say? Is it diplomatic pressure? What is the prize for Ukraine when it comes to influencing Washington at the moment?
I would say all 3 issues matter. Without the sustainable military support, it's still very hard for Ukraine to hold this war, even though the national production of weapons has grown. But there are technologies that Ukraine just simply does not produce. And one of the most important ones is air defense systems that are so important to protect human lives, because Russia hits civilians in the cities. So we need rockets for Patriots to protect people from Russian ballistic missiles. The second one is, of course, diplomatic pressure. Russia is not negotiating in good faith. Russia is not showing any signs that it wants peace. And the only way to bring Russia towards the negotiation table in good faith is to pressure Russia towards peace, to make Russian officials see that if they do not stop this war, the country will go bankrupt, their leadership will end, and this is the death of them. So in order to do so, the world has to put pressure on Russia, and sanctions is one of the way how to do that. And third issue, as you brought up, is the public attention. Public attention is vital in this issue because political decisions in democratic countries are made based on where public attention is. So we have to keep focus on Ukraine. And I know Ukrainian journalists are working on this day and night. Only 2 weeks ago on the National Mall in Washington, one of the organizations brought up a display of 20,000 teddy bears to show the 20,000 deported Ukrainian children that were kidnapped by Russia. And that had a lot of attention. A lot of American media and congressmen and senators came to support this cause. But overall, I would probably say that Ukraine is also, that's the biggest trend. Ukraine is also realizing it needs to find more relatable partners, and it needs to rely on itself more as well as the partners.
Maria, we appreciate your analysis very much indeed. Thank you for joining us from Washington. Okay, after the break, we'll check in with our correspondents around the globe. Do stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching Primetime. Europe's finance ministers are trying to solve three problems at once: protecting public money, financing Ukraine, and making the bloc more competitive in a tougher global economy. But behind the policy language in Brussels sits a bigger question. Can Europe build the financial scale it needs fast enough to keep pace with its global rivals?
Welcome to This Day in Europe, where EU finance ministers focus on fighting fraud, scaling up support for Ukraine, and pushing ahead with plans to strengthen Europe's financial system. At the two-day Economic and Financial Affairs Council meeting in Brussels, ministers agreed to new rules to crack down on VAT fraud. Investigators from the European Public Prosecutor's Office and the EU's anti-fraud agency will get direct access to cross-border VAT data to target organized crime and close costly loopholes. On Ukraine, they reviewed the economic and financial impact of Russia's aggression and progress on the €90 billion EU loan package agreed by the European Council last December and for which the legislative framework was finalized 2 weeks ago. The funds will be raised through EU borrowing and backed by the EU budget, with repayment expected from future Russian reparations. Ministers also debated the next steps in building a savings and investments union designed to deepen capital markets, remove barriers to cross-border investment, and unlock private funding to boost competitiveness. But even as Brussels pushes to deepen capital markets, there's growing concern the banks meant to power that system may simply be too small to compete globally, partly due to protectionism by member states with respect to mergers and acquisitions of systemically important banks. The group's chairman warned Europe's banking sector is still fragmented and lacks the scale of rivals in the US and China. He called for greater integration and more cross-border consolidation. As Europe cracks down on VAT fraud, funds Ukraine, and tries to mobilize capital, it must build financial scale quickly or risk falling behind in the global race for economic power. For A News, I'm Anita Sharma in Arnhem, Netherlands.
The second day of Saha Expo 2026 is underway in Istanbul, showcasing the latest innovations in Turkish defence and aerospace. With $8 billion in new contracts expected, the event highlights Turkey's growing self-sufficiency and global export reach. Nuray Mustafa has more.
The second day of the Saha Expo 2026 exhibition held in Istanbul continues with events and presentation in the fields of defense, aviation and space. The exhibition is attracting significant international interest. According to official information, Turkey expects approximately $8 billion worth of the contracts to be signed at the event. The country currently exports more than 230 products to 185 countries. The Saha Expo has grown considerably since 2018. At that time, there were 180 companies, whereas today the event is much larger. This year, around 200 delegations are participating. The exhibition is organized according to the Green Corridor principle. Major companies are positioned in central areas while their partner firms are located around them. Saha Istanbul has more than 1,300 members. The organization plays an important role in strengthening industrial cooperation. Over the past 20 years, local production in Turkey has increased significantly, exceeding 80%. The country now manufactures products across land, air, naval and space sectors. Turkey produces both major platforms and their components, exporting them abroad. Last year, export reached $10.5 billion.
%80'den fazla dışarıya bağımlı bir
We have transitioned from a defense industry that was over 80% dependent on foreign sources to one that today possesses more than 80% domestic and national capabilities. We are speaking of a sector with a turnover exceeding $20 billion, which as of last year realized $10.5 billion in exports. We are currently the world's 11th largest exporter, and we hope to rank among the top 10 in the short term. While the defence industry is undoubtedly vital for security, it is equally critical for an independent foreign policy. This sector contributes significantly to Turkey's overall independence, as a country cannot maintain an independent foreign policy without a self-sufficient defence industry.
The exhibition is also marked by several new innovations. The Uran 105mm self-propelled howitzer was presented for the first time. The system has been developed based on the engineering experience gained from the Boran howitzer. Boran system was previously used by the Turkish armed forces and was exported to Bangladesh in 2024. This marked Turkey's first ever howitzer export. The Uran system is more mobile and faster. It operates on a 4x4 platform, has a firing range of 18 km and is capable of firing 12 rounds per minute. There are the latest updates from the exhibition so far. Saha Expo 2026 continue on its second day with the new technologies, new contracts and expanding international cooperation. Nuray Mustafa, Abbas Hacıyev for A News, Istanbul, Turkey.
Turkey's foreign minister met his Saudi counterpart in Ankara on Wednesday for the third meeting of the Turkish-Saudi Coordination Council. Now, the talks were the latest sign of diplomatic rapprochement after years of strained ties between the two countries. Here are the details.
Turkey and Saudi Arabia have taken another step in their diplomatic reset at a meeting in Ankara. Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan met Saudi Foreign Minister Prince Faisal bin Farhan on Wednesday as part of the third meeting of the Turkish-Saudi Coordination Council. According to Turkish diplomatic sources, Fidan held talks with the Saudi delegation led by Prince Faisal. The council is designed as a platform for coordination and cooperation between the two countries on both bilateral and regional issues. The talks were held behind closed doors, so details of the meeting were not immediately available. But after the talks, the two top diplomats signed a bilateral agreement on mutual visa exemptions for holders of diplomatic and special passports. The visa agreement was a symbolic step with practical implications as Ankara and Riyadh continued to rebuild ties after several years of diplomatic friction. The talks come at a sensitive time with an ongoing regional war, tensions over the Hormuz Strait, mounting pressure on energy markets, and continued violence in Gaza, all of which have combined to shape Middle Eastern diplomacy. For Turkey, Saudi Arabia remains a key Gulf partner, economically, politically, and strategically. For Riyadh, relations with Ankara offer another channel for coordination at a time of unprecedented regional uncertainty. Wednesday's meeting served to confirm the Turkish-Saudi normalization process remains ongoing and will likely lead to greater coordination between these two influential states of the region. This is Adamara for A News in Istanbul, Turkey.
From import to export now, and Azerbaijan is aiming to transform its agricultural sector. At Caspian Agro Week in Baku, hundreds of companies from around the world are showcasing the technologies and partnerships driving that shift.
Today marks the second day of Caspian Agro Week 2026 at Baku Expo Center, where more than 400 companies from 45 nations continue showcasing what modern agriculture is capable of today.
The events are supported by the Ministry of Agriculture of Azerbaijan, along with key institutions such as the Food Safety Agency, COBIA, and international organizations including the FAO. Together, they underline the country's strategic focus on developing a competitive, innovation-driven agricultural sector. A key trend this year is the expansion of local production. Azerbaijan is actively working to reduce reliance on imports while increasing export capacity through new industrial projects and modern technologies.
We built a factory in Sumgait, covering an area of 3.5 hectares. A premium fertilizer called SOP, potassium sulfate fertilizer, is produced there. Until now, around 10,000 tons of potassium sulfate fertilizer were imported into Azerbaijan annually. The first phase of our factory will produce 10,000 tons and has already started production. With the second and third phases, our production will reach 40,000 tons. When we reach that level, we will move from being an importer to an exporter.
At the same time, international companies are strengthening their presence in the country, bringing expertise and advanced solutions to support local producers.
Futuro Italian companies specialize in turnkey projects for the grading and packing of fresh fruit and vegetables like peaches, stone fruit in general, apple, flat peaches. And we are in the country from 4 years. We have already delivered and installed a lot of line. And will be all the time a big pleasure for us to stay in this nice country, while this country has big potentiality. And our technology help our customer to export the internal and local product.
This year also marks a first, with African companies participating through the Africa-Azerbaijan Cooperation Platform, highlighting growing trade ties between the regions. Beyond the exhibition halls, the event features a wide-ranging business program, including international forums, panel discussions, and B2B and B2G meetings. New initiatives like the hosted buyer program and retail center are designed to connect producers directly with major retail chains and distributors.
Well, Baku welcomed the 5th Agro-Business Development Forum, where experts and officials explored the future of agriculture and food systems. The discussions also highlighted innovation and sustainable approaches to strengthening the sector. Chimnaz Shalar has the details.
The 5th Agro-Business Development Forum has been held in Baku as part of the Caspian Argo Week, bringing together officials, international partners and industry experts. Discussions focused on food security, sustainable development and ways to strengthen Azerbaijan's agri-food system. Speaking at the event, Agriculture Minister of Azerbaijan, Majnun Mehmedov, said the forum serves as an important platform to shape strategic approaches in the sector. He noted that Azerbaijan continues to prioritize agriculture with a strong focus on digitalization, innovation and the use of artificial intelligence. Participants also highlighted the importance of climate resilience agriculture, efficient use of resources and the expanding export potential. The forum continued with panel discussions and roundtables. I'm Chimnaz Shahlar with Zeynal Abdin Hassanov for A News.
Ahead of this month's World Urban Forum in Baku, diplomats and international organisations have gathered in Kabul to discuss how cities can become more resilient in the face of climate pressures, rapid growth and post-crisis recovery. Tamin Bahis has the details.
Representatives from the diplomatic community, the United Nations and international organizations gathered at Kabul's Grand Hotel on Tuesday for a pre-event ahead of the 13th World Urban Forum. The meeting was jointly organized by UN Habitat Afghanistan and the Embassy of the Republic of Azerbaijan in Kabul, with discussions centered on strengthening resilient cities and communities across Afghanistan. Heads of diplomatic missions accredited in Kabul attended the event, alongside officials from international agencies and humanitarian organizations. Participants were also briefed on preparation for the World Urban Forum, which is scheduled to take place in Baku, Azerbaijan later this month. Organizers highlighted the importance of sustainable urban planning, climate resilience and improved living conditions for rapidly growing urban populations. The event also featured presentations on innovative urban development, including the city of Irkadag, where digital and green technologies are being introduced into public infrastructure and services. This year's forum in Baku is expected to focus heavily on climate adaptation, green urban development, and post-crisis recovery strategies. There has been no official confirmation yet on the level of Afghanistan's participation or whether senior Afghan officials will attend the forum in Azerbaijan. Tamin Bahis in Kabul, A News.
The Iranian Red Crescent Society says it is stepping up efforts to document what it describes as violations of international humanitarian law during the recent conflict with Israel and the United States. As legal scrutiny grows, the focus is shifting from the battlefield to questions of accountability. Toraz Shirililo has more from Tehran.
The the Secretary General of the Iranian Red Crescent Society, IRCS, Maysam Afshar, said it has documented the violations of international humanitarian law during the Israeli and U.S. war on Iran. He said that IRCS has sent 35 official communications to the relevant international bodies protesting to the deliberate targeting of the civilian areas as well as medical centers. Speaking at a press briefing on Wednesday, he added that the international humanitarian organizations visited Iran during the war and had field observation of the non-military areas destroyed in the air raids. The IRCS president, Pir Hossein Kolivand, also referred to the visit last week to Iran by the president of International Committee of Red Cross, ICRC, to have first-hand information of the scale of strikes on capital Tehran, which was targeted more than 500 times. Kolivand announced that Iranian and foreign law experts will meet online next week to review aspects of violations of international humanitarian law in the war. The meeting will be held as part of the Crescent Week in Iran, coinciding the World Red Cross and Red Crescent Day, which is celebrated on 8th of May every year. It was also announced that the Iranian Red Crescent Society broke many records in terms of relief operations and missions and recruiting volunteers, while 4 aid workers were killed and 61 more wounded in the war. Turad Shiralilu from Iranian Red Crescent Society for A News.
From self-driving cars to AI-powered safety systems, Almaty has hosted the region's biggest technology gathering yet, highlighting how Central Asia and the Caucasus are moving quickly to position themselves in the global race for artificial intelligence.
Almaty hosted the first GITEX AI Central Asia and Caucasus Kazakhstan technology forum focused on artificial intelligence and digital infrastructure in the region. More than 300 companies and startups took part alongside over 200 speakers and more than 100 investors from 50 countries. The exhibition featured dozens of projects from smart cities and digital transport to AI solutions for business and everyday life. We took a look at what developers are already bringing to the market.
What we do here is we develop a lot of use cases, especially on the HS use cases. And you can see here, if in the live video, see for example, now I'm wearing a live vest and it is detecting, you can see a green indication there. So likewise, if I wear a helmet, gloves, it will detect. The same way in the real world, we have a lot of use cases developed. You can, as a HSE perspective, we can monitor the complete compliance, the PPE, as well as we also, evolved with other verticals in the retail industries, the, refineries, in energy industries.
But AI applications here go far beyond safety. One of the main areas of focus is transport.
Self-driving car developed in Kazakhstan is being showcased at the exhibition, marking a move beyond the experimental stage. The project is expected to enter a pilot phase by the end of this year. It's being developed by a local technical university where more than 500 specialists are working on training the system in real-world conditions.
In the future, if autonomous taxi projects are implemented, there will be a need for specialists who can work with them. We are training students for this field.
These developments reflect how Central Asia and the Caucasus are becoming an increasingly attractive market for global tech companies.
These regions, like Caucasus and Central Asia, it always been in the focus of Lenovo, because we know that these markets has the huge potential, and especially if we take into account investments made in every republic, it creates opportunity for every key player like Lenovo to give them the chance to represent their solution and address the problems the customers might have.
Strong interest from international buyers and investors reflects Kazakhstan's broader strategy to strengthen cooperation with global tech players and expand international partnerships in the digital sector.
This is one of the busiest events that people have told us that the country has seen when it comes to a meeting point within the tech space. So it's not what I think, it's actually what you see when you talk to our, the 200 buyers that are coming to spend $61 million here in this market.
I think it's a big event in Kazakhstan. It's very important because Kazakhstan tried to build a big partnership with the big company and include international company like the JITEX. Yeah, and JITEX came from with a big international big tech company, and 85% they came in Kazakhstan at the first time. And for us, we appreciate this because we understand we need to cooperate with international company.
JITEX AI Kazakhstan has concluded with the next edition scheduled for June 2027.
China's foreign minister has met his Iranian counterpart in Beijing in their first talks since the US-Israel war on Iran began. The meeting comes just days before a planned summit between Presidents Xi Jinping and Donald Trump. Manor Makdoum has more now from Beijing.
Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi met with Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi in Beijing on Wednesday, their first in-person meeting since the outbreak of the US-Israel war on Iran in February. The visit comes just 1 week before President Trump's scheduled summit with President Xi Jinping, making the timing highly significant. Two issues dominated the agenda: maintaining the April ceasefire and reopening the Strait of Hormuz, through which a fifth of the world's oil and gas once flowed. Washington has urged Beijing to press Iran to lift its hold on the waterway, and while China has condemned the US naval blockade on Iranian ports, it has also grown increasingly critical of Iran's own closure of the strait. The standoff has driven the global fuel prices and raised fears of a wider economic shock. Behind the diplomacy, Iran was seeking clarity on whether Beijing might make concessions to Washington at the upcoming summit that could leave Tehran exposed. Araghchi reaffirmed the ties between the two countries would only grow stronger, but with Trump arriving in Beijing in just over a week, how Beijing navigates the relationship may shape the trajectory of the conflict itself. Manor Makdoum, A News, Beijing.
Well, that brings us to the end of Prime Time for tonight. Please do join us again tomorrow, though, for plenty more news and analysis. And from all of us here at A News, thanks for watching.